Welcome to the extraordinary meeting. We'll move on to the fire procedure. Fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs, do not use the lift. Once outside the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Please exit by the door of which you've entered the room by, or by the exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. And if you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Can you please make sure all your mobile phones are turned off or on silent, please? Apologies.
Madam Mayor, we have apologies from Councillor Brindley, Councillor Doherty, Councillor Tony Lloyd and Councillor Tracy Shepherd.
Thank you. Any others? Apologies. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor at work, and Councillor Grant, who isn't well tonight.
Moving on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest that are not minuted in the paperwork? Councillor Guttridge.
For the National Health Service. Thank you.
Move on to public speaking. I'm aware of I've had a public speaking request from Mrs. Condacor, and there's 20 minutes set aside for public speaking. So, Mrs. Condacor.
Thank you. The wording of the SDP is obviously very woolly and not very specific, so it's very hard to know exactly what will come of it and things. So I want to just ask the portfolio holder to ensure that the council does actually take part in all the stages of the SDP. We may not support everything in there, and we certainly don't support if there is any closures locally and things. But obviously, some of the stuff in the SDP is actually a good thing, trying to put more emphasis on prevention and not just dealing with acute crises and conditions. So that is a good thing. But obviously, we do want to keep services locally. I also wanted to ask the portfolio holder what contact he's had with the relevant parties so we actually know what the current situation as of tonight, as opposed to just when it was published thing, and also what contacts you've had with your counterparts at Hinckley and Bosworth Borough Council, because obviously there are a lot of patients from that area that come to the George Eliot Hospital. But similarly, any changes that Leicestershire and Leicester STP, which is obviously a separate STP, that could have a big implication. So I want you to, to find out whether you've had contact with them, so that there is actually some liaison cross-border. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor London.
Thank you. Most of the points will be at the STP. With regard to Hinckley and Bosworth, no, I haven't. Simply because Hinckley and Bosworth are technically covered by the Leicestershire STP, and I understand that's not as bad as ours, and neither is Birmingham. But if they contact me with regard to what's happening with services in this area, because people from Hinckley and Bosworth actually access those services, then I'll report back to Council on what the situation is. The rest of it will be covered under as we go through the STP.
Other members of the public who wishes to speak on the SDP agenda item? No.
Everybody has a copy of the amended recommendations. They're very small. It just amends 2.1 to include cuts to health services, and 2.5 goes to 2.6, and we insert the council wishes to all three local members, rights to all wishes. The council rights to... Sorry.
Many patients. I have got to ask the council if they're happy for that to happen under the Constitution, paragraph 13(7)(a). So, and it is just, it's not for debating, it's just for a show of hands. So can I ask if members are happy for that altered motion to go forward? All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? Thank you very much. It's carried, so.
Thank you for that, Madam Mayor. Saved me a job. I think it's worth a bit of a recap of how we got here. Last year, the government came up with an estimate that by 2021, the National Health Service would cost £30 billion more than it does today. They said that they'd put £8 billion into it, leaving a shortfall of £22 billion for 44 STP areas, the Sustainable Transformation Plan, known as footprints. Our footprint is obviously Coventry and Warwickshire. In straightforward terms, each footprint would need to find something in the region of £500 million each to make up the £22 billion. I don't think there's anybody in the country that's actually coming up with £500 million at the moment. Initially, Coventry and Warwickshire were going to find £200 million. However, the first Health and Wellbeing Board that I attended, that figure had risen to £500 million. That then dropped to £400 million, and then just before the release of the STP, it became circa, or about, £400 million. And I have to say that all of this was done in total and utter secrecy. We were not allowed to see anything until the 6th of December, when it was first published. Running alongside of that, the Coventry and Warwickshire set up a Concord Act to work together to achieve the savings. I refused, on behalf of this council, to actually enter into any agreement about the STP and the Concord Act. And I did that on the basis that, on the orders of government and NHS England, we were refused access to all documents and not given any chance to influence or have any input to them. In any case, I do not believe that the amount of money being proposed could be taken out of the Coventry and Warwickshire health economy without major cuts to services. We were told that people may need to travel further. That's one of the things that came out of the meetings that we had. And some services would need to be consolidated, whatever that means. And that we, the royal we, local authorities in the main, need to change public expectations about the health service and what people can expect from it. I was not too happy about that, and I said you can count me out of that because it works differently in local government, where it's the people who tell us what they're prepared to accept. The Coventry and Warwickshire proposals were sent to the NHS England on the 14th of October, and we were expecting them to be released shortly after that. And as I say, eventually they were released on the 6th of December. They were leaked 2 days before that to the media, and I can understand how the media arrived at the assumptions that they did. And whilst there are no definites in the STP, I don't think the media were far off the mark. Having had a chance to go through it several times, it leaves you with confusion and without any information whatsoever. And as far as it goes, the document, the way it was constructed, it leaves it open for the team drawing up the proposals to actually refute anything about service closures or changes to the service. The document also mentions savings of £267 million. That's the first time ever that figure has been arrived at. So just before December the 6th, we were told it was circa £400 million. On December the 6th, we find out that they're talking about £267 million. But nowhere in the document does it tell you where that money's coming from. It's just a figure. There's no details on what they're going to be doing, and it begs the question of why the Health and Wellbeing Board was not told, and also why we've not had any indication about how they intend to progress and implement what the plans are. The document itself covers all aspects of healthcare, not just hospitals. It's social care, GPs, all parts of the NHS. Nothing really is exempt. And as far as it goes, it's very sparse on the details. But the words like consolidation, co-location and collaboration leaves the door open to speculation. And I can understand why people are speculating in the way that they are, and I tend to agree with them. Most of the document is written in NHS management speak, and for any layperson such as myself, it's difficult to follow, and it's even more difficult to understand, even with a 7-page glossary of terms, which you have to keep referring to find out what they're talking about. There's an intention to follow this up with specific public meetings on individual elements. And the first, I believe, for this area would be maternity. When that's coming out, I don't know. I don't think they've yet set a date. If they have, we haven't been told. And whether there'll be any release of documentation on what the intentions are for maternity at the GEH remains to be seen. It might just be that it's a verbal report. All over the country, I'll move the recommendations as printed, Madam Mayor.
Second, Madam.
Large part of what is actually in the recommendations which has been put forward, we as the opposition actually agree with. In the spirit of trying to find a unanimous consensus which all of us can vote for, I would like to move the following amendments to the recommendations. That at 2.1, we delete cuts to health services proposed by Coventry and Warwickshire STP and reinstate the original wording in the recommendations that this council does not support or endorse the Coventry and Warwickshire STP. I would also move that we delete 2.1a, the potential loss of health-related services. Nowhere in the STP document, Madam Mayor, are any specific cuts mentioned. And also to delete 2.4, which is, in our view, a naked attempt at trying to politicise the issue of the George Eliot Hospital. The government has a duty of care. We all recognise that. And also about health being free at the point of delivery. But you are not talking about the specifics of the George Eliot Hospital. You are going into generalities and attempting to make a party political point, in our view. If you want cross-party support, then I would move those amendments, and I may have further to say depending on the result of the amendment, Madam Mayor.
Right to speak, Madam Mayor.
It's not that I wasn't expecting it. It seems a shame that the party opposite would actually try and chuck out part of these recommendations. It's quite true in 2.4 that the government has a duty of care to the people of this country. They do not have a mandate to make wholesale cuts to the health service. It wasn't in your manifesto to do that, and as that, they do not have that mandate in order to do that. The word cuts is quite legitimate because that's exactly what is going to happen. If you're going to take £267 million out of the health economy of Coventry and Warwickshire, something is going to get cut. And therefore, that's a legitimate amendment to make. And as far as it goes, you can't say that it's not party political because it is. This is coming straight from the top, straight from government, straight through NHS England, down to the people of this country. And that's what it's about. And if you can't support these recommendations, you will be doing a disservice to the people of this borough and be accountable to them.
It's really to speak with disbelief that anyone in the chamber would wish to delete paragraph 2.4. that anyone in this chamber does not believe that our NHS, which is the most vital service we have in our country, that anyone believes that we should not be providing a free at the point of contact National Health Service. I don't understand anyone in the chamber actually proposing that we should take out that statement. It is fundamental to the very essence of a universal National Health Service, and for that reason, Madam Mayor, I cannot vote for the amendment proposed by the party opposite.
Thank you very much. At the County Council on the STP, where there was motions from various parties, and at the end of the day, the meeting was adjourned while the different sides actually agreed on a compromise wording that everyone can agree with. And at the end of the day, every single county councillor in Warwickshire voted actually to support a common motion very much along the lines of protecting local health services, keeping local services local, because a lot of people really have difficulty travelling to services when they're unwell. And I think it was a very good thing that we actually came to a compromise. So I am very disappointed that the Labour and the Tory group aren't actually meeting in a huddle and coming to a common set of words, because most people in this town want to save the George Eliot. The George Eliot is one of the biggest employees and one of the biggest assets we've got in this town. It's gone through a lot of bad times and is actually recovering now. Yeah, the mortality rates are getting better. The number of people being born at the George Eliot's going up. And I do hope, I really don't care what the wording is, whether it's a Labour one or the Tory amendment. What I care about is we actually send a strong message saying we're 100% against the loss of services at the George Eliot. So I think I'm actually going to propose we adjourn for 5 minutes so the two parties could actually talk to each other and come to a common set of motion and wording that everyone was happy with.
I'm being advised by the legal officer that can't be done. And I follow legal advice, obviously, as the Mayor. So, just so you're aware.
Well, I don't, but that's another story. It's interesting what's been put forward in the sense that, in some senses, it takes us back to the original, so it takes out cuts in the first part. But it's 2.4, and getting rid of that I find fascinating. Let's go through it. That this council emphasise that the government has a duty of care to the residents of the borough and the country as a whole to provide a free, at point of contact, National Health Service. Got a problem with that? No. Okay, tick. So then we go on to recognising that the country already spends less per GDP on health than most of the other countries. Problem with that? Problem with a fact? No. The Council therefore reinforced that the government has a duty to consult. I'm not really keen on this by any way they deem appropriate, but that's another matter, on the costs of maintaining the National Health Service before making additional damaging cuts to current services. Now, the bit you're probably a bit miffed at there is the cuts. Well, let's look at, and it's been stressed by somebody who could speak far more eloquently about it than me, Councillor Longdon, how can it not be cuts? There's less money there. Now, I accept that the National Health Service needs a shuffle about, and there's no question of that. I've got experience myself, with me personally and my family. There's things that could be done that's better. But when you're talking about this amount of money, 40 times over the country, hey, we're talking about cuts, and that's just fact. So I just don't see how you can think there's no cuts involved in this. So I'd be happy, I'd like somebody to explain where 2.4, is it just the word cuts in there, or what else is it in 2.4? I don't see a problem with it, and, I just don't see a problem with it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Anything that makes sense, literally. And well, I mean, 2.4, that seems to be the reason we've been gathered here tonight for this bit of Labour group PR, because I kind of hoped this was going to be about patients and people, but you just want to make it about politics. What a shame. What a shame. We've got no... The only people saying that a health service shouldn't be free at the point of delivery and talking about that are members opposite. We're not. We're very clear. The Conservative government, as you keep talking about them rather than the council, are very clear that the health service will be free at the point of delivery. And cuts, well, your maths probably works different to mine, but we're putting £10 billion more in to the health service than Labour were going to. And it refers in 2.4 to, they need to consult the country. Yeah, it was called a general election. Do you remember what happened in the general election? You lost. The days when Labour could turn around and say the health service is safe with us are gone. The general election proved it. You wouldn't match the spending commitments that the Conservatives were saying, 8 billion straight away and more to follow. Ed Miliband got himself in a pickle and you lost the election. And I still haven't heard from Labour politicians any pledge from Corbyn or any of the others to match even, let alone better, the 10 billion that we're putting in and the more that will go in future. Now, this council is getting a bit beyond itself because that's national government and the general election decided it. We should be worried and concerned about Nuneaton and Bedworth and our population and our residents and our health service. And you've got a motion, which we're all happy to agree to, until you start going off talking about general elections and consulting the country and we all believe in a health service free at the point of delivery. We all believe in apple pie and motherhood, and why not put all those things in as well? You're doing it to make a political point, and it's most distasteful. We can have unanimity like we did at the county council. We can all vote together. You just need to take the politics out of this and remember the people and the patients. Thank you.
Beat for long on this. They talk about politics. Well, it's simple to me. The figures you talk about, 30 billion out. As you say, 10 billion, but I understand it's 8 billion in. Well, the figures don't matter. That's a cut. That is a cut, whether you like it or not. You call it austerity. I call it a cut. Yeah, thank you. And at the end of the day, we're talking about consultation. We want proper, open consultation. That's what is wanted, not behind closed doors, as has been explained earlier.
Thank you very much. Points here, but if it's political, it's political. A cut is a cut, or a cut is a saving. We are concerned about the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth, Hinckley and Bosworth, about the services that they will suffer. If you're going to take £22 billion out of the health economy across the country by call it savings rather than cuts, you call it savings and efficiencies, we will call it cuts, because people will suffer. I'll give you an example. If it's the situation at the present moment in time, if you compare it with a flood, right, the flood is ending at the hospitals. The hospitals are on their knees. And at the present moment in time, the NHS can not even maintain the services that were inherited. Madam Mayor, I find it also very hypocritical that Hunt, right, because that's where the book stops. He mandates down to all the other organisations within the NHS. They don't run it themselves, but transparency says this is what we want to happen. We want £22 billion taken out of the health economy, and we'll give you £8 billion in return to make up the 30. That is going to have drastic measures. How can you not support something that says cuts? Because it is a cut. You're in total self-denial. Your political masters, and not you, that's all, I'm not getting at you, but I'm getting at the Tory party. The Tory party will run down this National Health Service. No,
10 billion more in?
no, by taking 22 billion out. Also, there is the fact that you go back to manifestos. I remember a manifesto in 2010 that says no. Pardon? I just speak loud. Yeah, free will, Madam Mayor. They talk about a manifesto in 2010. That party said no top-down reorganisation of the National Health Service. What do we had? We've had 6 years of reorganisation of the National Health Service. And I'll leave you with this point, right? Because if Trump, when he becomes... No, you might laugh, but it's only if you let me finish.
Point of order, Madam Mayor. This is Donald Trump and the National Government and not the George Eliot. We're way off topic.
It could be a thing for the future. If we have a trade agreement with America, right, when we come out of Europe, their health service will be all over us like a rash. Just bear it in mind, 8 years, no health service.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me. Councillor Condacor made a point earlier about the discussion that was held at the County Council a little while ago. Yes, he was absolutely right. There was a consensus view. None of the recommendation that went before, none of the recommendations from each of the parties that went forward were changed as a result of that. And many of the 62 members who actually spoke in that debate, many of them spoke about cuts to the NHS across Warwickshire. What is different about this evening is that it's the Conservatives who brought the politics into this discussion this evening, not Labour with the word cuts. It's the Conservative group who have brought disrepute into this chamber by talking about the politics of these proposals. There is no need for that. There was not one single accusation of politics among 62 members in the County Council debate a few weeks ago. I am appalled by their behaviour, Madam Mayor.
On the amendment, all those in favour of the amendment, please show. 2, 3, 4. Against?
We go back to the substantive. It's lost.
No, that's lost, so we move back to the substantive motion. Any member wishes to speak on that? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Now we've had rather more heat than light from the party opposite. They mention about facts. Well, let me give a few facts. These aren't my own findings. These are from the NHS Confederation, hardly a source likely to support the Conservative Party. 10 years ago, the NHS budget was £75 billion.
Councillor Wilson, can I ask you to sit down just a minute? There seems to be a bit of an issue legally.
Yes, because he's started to speak on the original motion.
Would you like to?
Yeah, he can't speak on this.
Unfortunately, I'm being told legally you can't speak on this. Do you want the explanation from the legal officer?
Point of order. I spoke on the amendment, not on the substantive
that was
issue.
my understanding. But according to the legal officer, that's not the case. Please.
Yes, Madam Mayor. The position is that Councillor Wilson actually spoke on the original motion in order to move the amendment. So, having done so, he's now spoken on it. And members can only speak once on a motion. Obviously, if there's a further amendment, he'll be able to speak on that, but he can't speak again on the original motion, having already done so.
So, so any other member?
Councillor Condacor.
Maximum practice of this council. If the officers are now trying to use obscure technicalities in the Constitution to say then that is a gross shame on today's democracy, because I quite clearly moved an amendment and my wording was the preamble to the amendment, not speaking to the original motion. It is a grave day for democracy when you stifle the ability of a political party's members to speak. I'm elected just as much as all the others on the other side of the chamber, Madam Mayor.
It's actually the legal officer who was advising myself that you can't, because he is looking at the Constitution. Would you like to go over the Constitution piece for me, please, again, Philip?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I have it's Council Procedure Rule 13.5, which says that a councillor who has spoken on a motion may not speak again whilst it is the subject of debate, except to speak once on an amendment moved by another member.
I am going to move on. Any member wishes to speak? Councillor Golby.
Clarify that this is speaking on the STP. Is that the STP document? Is that okay? Right. It was just basically I've been a bit concerned about what's going on. I was concerned enough to actually make contact with Kath Kelly at the George Eliot she's the chief executive, and I asked if I could meet with her to discuss the NHS STP document, which was initially leaked and then released. Because when I read it, I couldn't find any specific mention of any closures of A&E or maternity and paediatrics at the George Eliot. She responded pretty much immediately, and I had a meeting with her last week. During the meeting, Kath and I discussed the STP document and the comments of the press and on social media, and it was very apparent that despite all the things being said, there's no reference to closures of A&E or maternity and paediatrics at the George Eliot. She explained this is why there's been no discussion or public consultation regarding closures, because and no one at the George Eliot is trying to hide anything, but because there's nothing to discuss or have a consultation on, as there are no planned closures taking place. Kath Kelly also confirmed that going forward there will be developments in shared working between many hospitals on many aspects of treatment and care, i.e. redesigning, transforming and consolidating services. However, this is not to be taken that there will be closures at the George Eliot Hospital. And co-location actually means the same thing in two places, so that's not a cut, that's actually increasing services, one in each place. I also got to go on a little walk around maternity, which was completely off impromptu, and I was talking to a maternity nurse, a matron at the special care baby unit. We talked about how the maternity and paediatrics already operate joint working programmes with many other hospitals in Coventry and Warwickshire, and also beyond, and the SCBU already take babies that are in need of special care from wider county and beyond. I personally don't see this type of joint working as a problem. I actually see it as a vibrant 7-year-old girl, because had this not working not been in place, my daughter would be dead. She was born with severe breathing difficulties that couldn't be dealt with by the Eliot, so she was immediately shipped off to Leicester. They made her well enough. They got her back. She went to SCBU. She stayed there, and I honestly can't see a problem in that, because my daughter's alive because of it. I've got nothing but praise for the Eliot staff. I've got nothing but praise for the joint working. And Kath also recently pointed out the recent extensive refurbishments of the maternity facilities. She said, why would all this be going on if there were no plans to close anything? And I've got to say, since I was in there 4.5 years ago giving birth to my son, it's an amazing what they've actually achieved and done. Then A&E. She's told me that they currently deal with 250 to 260 people a day, around 50 to 60 ambulances, and there's no way they would see that down the road anywhere else. We picked up on comments made in the last meeting here about reconfiguring and consolidation means that we're unlikely to have A&E because everything will be downgraded. The intensive care unit that will be lost. She was furious. There's no way intensive care is going anywhere, because without intensive care, they can't perform high-risk procedures. They can't have coronary care. A&E is not the bedrock of ITU. So it's absolutely wrong to say that it is, and that there will be loss of facilities at the George Eliot because of it. She was so worried that she's actually written a letter to 150 staff, which I quote, "I also wish to acknowledge the recent media attention surrounding the Sustainability and Transformation Plan and a suggestion that services including A&E will close. I can categorically assure you that there are no plans to close our A&E department. I can only apologise to you for any distress and anxiety that these unfounded reports have caused you. I will continue through Team Elliott Talks to maintain as many open communication channels as possible and respond to the concerns of all our staff." This is direct from the chief exec at the hospital. She says she's so proud of everything that's been done, the achievements that have gone on in that hospital in the last few years. She reiterated that a primary responsibility is to her staff and to the communities within the George Eliot, that the George Eliot serves, not just locally, but further afield. She said she's got no doubt it would be a different story for the Eliot if not for their staff and their willingness to push and adapt to achieve positive change. The fact that making unfounded claims of department closures is extremely damaging to the hospital and the hospital staff and their morale and the communities which it serves, and is wholly unacceptable. And that was from the CEO, the chief exec of the George Eliot. I've got loads more, but obviously I've...
Any other member wishing to speak? Councillor Harvey.
As I guess everybody in here would, and that is, I use the NHS, and I have done ever since I was born, and I think it still remains one of the proudest achievements in this country, and not one that was brought in from the very beginning without controversy. So let's not believe that everybody believes in motherhood, apple pie, and the NHS, because that has not been the case. But it is dearly loved by the people of Nuneaton and Bedworth, along with the rest of this country. Last night I was watching a programme, which I watch every week, 24 hours in A&E, and you see the dedication of the staff. This is in particular just the A&E. It's a London hospital they use, but that could be said the same all across the country and here in Nuneaton and Bedworth. It's also said, and clear from that programme, that people have faith in what happens in our hospitals. There are individual cases where things have not gone according to plan, but I thank George Eliot for saving my life. But at the end of the day, Madam Mayor, let's get it clear. I think Councillor Golby has gone off on a tack, because this is not coming from the George Eliot. This is about all the health services in this area. And what may be moved here, what may be moved there, and what may be consolidated. I hate using all these words with 5 and 6 syllable words in these paragraphs, 5 and 6 syllable words in them. Even sustainable transformation plan. Well, it's sustainable because people want to sustain life and they want their lives to be transformed by the National Health, whether that's by prevention as well as by cure. But to wrap it up in all these extremely complicated terms means that people do not instantly see what may be happening. And what may be happening are cuts. Nobody in this room has criticised the George Eliot. And as I said, many people have got real reasons to be thankful to the George Eliot. But it's about all this area's facilities. And yes, I've also been thankful to the University Hospital in Coventry for treatment. And I believed at that time that was the right place to go. But when people say it doesn't say anything about A&E and it doesn't say anything about maternity, it should. Because it should. They
said it doesn't say anything about closing A&E or closing maternity. It doesn't say anything about A&E or maternity, which is the insinuation that you've just given.
I was talking in general. I've got a newspaper report in front of me here which says there's no decision made about A&E. It should be saying, on behalf of all the people in Nuneaton and Bedworth, the biggest of the 3 areas I'm going to speak, North Warwickshire and Hinckley and Bosworth, because it's all their hospital, right up to Dordon. It's everybody's hospital. And it should be saying there will be an A&E and there will be a maternity. When I teach at Baddesley Enser School, which is on the edge of North Warwickshire, almost every child was born at the George Eliot. In fact, they think George Eliot was born there and she was named after the hospital. But the point is, Madam Mayor, they come to Nuneaton. Imagine the distances if that doesn't exist. It should be made clear from the start that those services are not under threat, and towns of the size that we are have a right to their own A&E and a right to their own maternity. That should be agreed by everybody. It shouldn't be that there are no plans. It should be these services will be kept. And then I personally, I don't know about other people, I personally have no objection to certain services, being specialised in certain hospitals, and let's hope our hospital be one of them. But a lot of this is also about taking people out of hospital into care of other types. And you'll see later on this evening, we're going to talk about where all that money has been withdrawn, so many people have to stay in the hospital, therefore depriving our hospitals of money. And so at the end of the day, Madam Mayor, that is cuts. I don't care how much the NHS costs. That should be number one priority in this country. The health of every single citizen, free. Full stop. And let them look at other things where money is wasted or taxes are not high enough for the very wealthy. The NHS should come first. And everybody in this chamber should be agreeing with that, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Condicle.
I agree with Councillor Harvey, but a lot of what he says brings out a lot of important points. But then again, one thing that Councillor Goby said was it doesn't say there's going to be cuts. And this is the problem we have. We do not know what is going on. And how on earth can we move forwards in saving and protecting our health service if we don't know that it is or that it isn't being cut? One of the real big things that came out at the County Council meeting was an absolute anger at the incomprehensiveness of this subject and the need to have a new chair. The STP is chaired by the boss of Coventry and Warwickshire Hospital, UCHW, and it has an interest in moving services to UHCW. The George Eliot is recovering from many years of issues and is getting better and better. There is clearly, talking to people, a lot of bad things happened 10 years ago, lots of issues. We have a new management and a reviving George Eliot, which many people are proud of. It still has loads of issues, but it is getting a better and better hospital. It is getting a hospital where people are choosing to have their births there now. And so we need to join up. We need to say that George Eliot is a red line. A&E, various things, maternity, these are red lines. We are not going to let them be lost. But we also need to be clear that there might not or might be proposals to lose them. So I think we need to put pressure on to restart the STP with a proper chair who will actually speak in English and actually understand what we need and how we really love our health service here. It's so important. And also, we've seen other places like Shropshire's been on the TV where they are losing A&Es and maternities. So there is a real risk, which is why we all need to work together. We need our MPs to be absolutely clear that this is something they will not allow to be lost. Yeah, I expect Marcus and Craig Tracy, yeah. I expect them to be doing a massive work at the moment to try and keep them. I don't trust them a bit, but I know they need to do it, and if they save the services, I'll be glad to them, because I'm not particularly political on these things, and I hope the Labour group, the Labour people, they're campaigning for our health service. But I say the big issue at the moment is the chair of the STP is talking gibberish, and we've got no idea if the Tories are right and there's nothing being cut, or Labour's right and everything's going. Yeah, where can we go? And the final point I want to make is we need to have one protest group. Back in 2006, there were separate marches. There were marches organised by the Labour group, and we had Labour marches on a Saturday. And there was marches with the Greens, Socialists, Tories, and all sorts of other people on a Wednesday. We need a combined effort to save our health service.
The Hancocks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to start by saying that there clearly are possibilities of cuts and a severe threat to the services that are provided locally. And anybody that doesn't believe that is naive, to say the least, Madam Mayor. And whilst we recognise the Elliott has made massive improvements over recent years, we have lost services there to what I still call Walsgrave, call me old-fashioned. If you remember, we had one of the finest units for plastic surgery here at the George Eliot, treated many of the service people that were involved in the Falklands. That got taken to Walsgrave. Maybe that type of service is better centralised like some major heart facilities. But it isn't just about the George Eliot Hospital. Let's not get bogged down about the hospital. It's also about all the other issues around social care, bed blocking, as the leader's already mentioned, things like that. And I don't mind repeating it, Madam Mayor. The Strategic Transformation Plan is a long name for cuts. I've got no doubt about that. There's history of it before. In fact, it's very similar language that's been used in the past by the County Council when they've wanted to transform services. And what they've been has been cuts to services. Also, and again it's repeating it, but I make no apologies for it, the document is largely not understandable. Most people will struggle to understand the wording within that document. And before we get to the argument again about, oh, we should be talking about local issues, not national, it's a national document that's out for consultation across the country. We're relating ours to the more local area, but we also have a wider intake, and people do move about as people have a choice of where they want to go to anyway, you know, if they can get an operation quicker somewhere else. And again, to say that being naive, I remember, because I've been around a long time and done lots of campaigning within the health service, I remember standing with the people in Rugby opposing the closure of their accident emergency unit. We were unsuccessful. It closed. The local MPs have been rather clever in how they've really put their press releases out. They've rushed off to speak to the health ministers, and they say, well, there's nowhere in the document, which has also just been repeated here, that says services are going to be lost. Clever use of words. The service may not be lost. It doesn't say it may be moved. And that's a really important issue, because I've long held the view you should provide services wherever you can locally. It's maybe not so important. For you as a patient, you probably don't care. You just want to get better. But if you want your family to support you and other people to be able to get and see you and visit you and support you in your recovery, you need to be local. To get from here to Walsgrave, whether you be in Nuneaton or Bedworth, you're looking at least 2 bus journeys, and probably knocking on for 2.5 hours with all the breaks in the journeys and things. So it's important that those services are retained locally. And if it's A&E and maternity, it should be in the George Eliot. I guess the final concern I've got is really the person that's been tasked with putting this report together. And I'm not sure how people's perceptions are of somebody that's already in charge of the major hospital in the area, which is Walsgrave, the UHCW. Clearly, well, I would see that as having an interest in that. Because if they can pull in more services to that hospital, clearly that makes theirs more sustainable in their view. We need our services provided locally, and I think all of us should be voting to make sure that the message goes across, especially to our MPs and everybody else, that we will not see those services lost to the local community. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Margaret.
First of all, I'd like to pick up on some of the debate that's been had so far. Councillor Condacor earlier on said that we should all compromise, and I will never compromise with the NHS, and we shouldn't compromise with the principles of the NHS.
Compromise on the NHS, I said we should compromise on the wording.
Document, Madam Mayor, I hope I'll get that time added back on. This document, Madam Mayor, speaks about reducing unit cost of provision by delivering care at lower costs, improving efficiencies, delivering collective productivity opportunities, developing a workforce that's appropriate to transform services. Now, what that really means, in ordinary speak, is it wants to have services that are cheaper, there's going to be less, and this is about the whole health economy. So, for example, in care, a previous visit for somebody that might have been half an hour has now gone down to 15 minutes. We're looking at people getting less services and less provision. And this document does actually speak about that. And I call that, in ordinary speak, cuts. These are proposed cuts. Now, what some people may not know is that I've struggled with my health over my entire life. I was actually born very premature. You wouldn't think of it looking at me today. I'm twice the man I was when I was first elected to this chamber, literally. But I was one of the few babies to survive in the baby unit, and I was born deaf, and I've had many years of operations. And as a teenager, I actually nearly died of meningitis in the George Eliot. And this has led to serious health problems, and I've spent my life in and out of hospital, including the George Eliot. And it was actually my consultant at the George Eliot who took time to go to my school to help me take my GCSEs. And it's down to caring doctors and nurses like the ones that I experienced that have made a difference to my life. And a hospital isn't just somewhere you go to get a problem sorted, it's a real part of a community. And if we don't have a local hospital, we will be losing something fundamental. And what scares me most about these plans is that there will be some young child out there or older person who's going to lose out, to not get the service that I experienced and to not have the life chances that all of us have today because of, at some point, a friend, a family or ourselves have been to the George Eliot or to other health services in the borough. Now, today is also, would have been my father's birthday. He would have been 60 today. And like many people in this borough, he died far too early because many people in this borough have a higher mortality rate than people in the south of the county. We don't have hospice beds at this part of the county. We don't have the services that we need. And there is a lot of demand, more demand here in Nuneaton and Bedworth than there is in other parts of Warwickshire. So I notice in this report that South Warwickshire appears, from my understanding, untouched. And I think that is grossly unfair when we need more, not less, more. And importantly, as Tony Benn once said, I know the colleagues opposite will love Tony Benn, so if we can find the money to kill people, we can find the money to help people. Now, what he was saying there was that we need to put our priorities right. And this report speaks about not the patients, not the community, not what they want and their vision, but it speaks about the STP's vision. It speaks about telling people what they're going to get. And what they're going to get, if this goes through, is less services. Now, on the national point, I think the national point is very important in the whole economic ecosystem of the health economy. The fact is, there are people we see on the news waiting on hospital trolleys for 12 hours. The NHS is in crisis, and you are, my friends, in denial about the reality. The reality is, whether you've put more money in or not, you've cut funding, and the LGA agree with this, you've cut funding for social services and other provision, and people are suffering.
Yeah, I've got to say, I mean, we've heard about the rumour mongering and everything else from individuals opposite. When I first heard of this, and I couldn't believe it, it was 6:30 in the morning listening to CWR. On the way to work, and it came over, and I actually pulled over to actually sit and listen to it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, because it was the first, really. I knew the STP was coming out, but it was the first, really, that I'd heard about it. And that's where all the cuts came from. The mention of cuts in maternity, the mention of cuts in A&E. Now, the press are not always right, and I've criticised the press on numerous occasions. But on this occasion, I, like others, can see why they drew that conclusion from the leaked document. As I said before, 30 million being cut from the budget. 30 billion being cut for the budget across the country, across England. At the end of the day, those cuts are going to take their toll on local services, whether we like it or not. You reorganise, and when they do reorganise, we've got to make sure that our services within Nuneaton and Bedworth are safe. You've seen on the TV this week, every night when I've watched the 10 o'clock news, every single night, it's been about A&E, the doctors, the nurses, the patients. Patients on there telling their stories. And the latest one, loneliness, care in the community, is a big issue. People being discharged early because of bed blocking, and then not the right care in place. We've heard of the terrible accounts of some authorities, county authorities, some areas, actually only giving 15-minute visits to residents. It's absolutely appalling. I have family members that survive. They need those visits, and 15 minutes just isn't enough. I've had a family member that was discharged from hospital premature, and there's a hell of a strain on the family to look after that individual. We talk about, everybody in here has had the horror stories, where they've had a relative that's been took into hospital, and sometimes they don't make it. Most of the times, if you're lucky, they do. I've had a sister that was taken into George Eliot and was transferred because the better care was at Birmingham, at Queen Elizabeth, and she survived. It was life-threatening. And you can go on. But at the end of the day, it's about, one, we need to put the care back into the community. I agree with that. But it's got to be the right care and not 15 minutes. We can't say it's not cuts, because there's a 30 billion cuts of the National Health nationally, which is being funnelled down from the top down. So it is government orientated. It is being pushed down by the government. And it's what you call your austerity. It's another word for that. Now, as I said, the 15 minutes is deplorable. People will not read the STP document. They won't read it. They won't look at it. It's too confusing, it's too long, and the words are too long. They just will not read it. They'll rely on us. They'll rely on the press to get their information. And I agree that information's got to be accurate. It has to be accurate. I think we all agree that. But let's don't elude ourselves that these ain't cuts. There's 30 billion worth. I'll say it again and again. 30 billion worth of cuts. And you can wave your hands and do everything else, but that's denial. Watch the news. Listen to the doctors. Listen to the public. Listen to the nurses. Go and have a look at A&E. If they did close A&E at George Eliot Hospital, I'll tell you something. One thing I will say, they will not cope at Coventry.
Before we move on, I've got Councillor Phillips, Councillor Elliott, Councillor Copland, Councillor Gutteridge, Councillor Tremans and Councillor Haynes still to speak. Councillor Phillips.
Madam Mayor, I'm dismayed at the comments that I've heard tonight from the opposition. On page 23 of the report, right at the top, revised Coventry and Warwickshire STP states the total do-nothing financial challenge facing the healthcare system by 2021 is forecast to be 267 million. Implicit in that is that that's how much has to be found in savings. Now, the daft comments that we've had about health not being political, the health service has always been political. It was created by the Labour Party at the opposition, political ever since.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I didn't say that the health service was being politicised. I said this motion was being politicised. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think you've misunderstood me. But anyway, I'll carry on. So, it's funny how the NHS only ever becomes unsustainable under Tory government. That's never the case under Labour. It's called a sustainability transformation plan. Now, if it was any other government, you might think, yeah, okay, let's see something positive. It's never the case under a Tory government. What the STP is Tory priorities, as mentioned earlier. The NHS is sustainable in my view. It's just a question of priorities. And if you look at this government's priorities, what have they done? They've cut inheritance tax, they've cut corporation tax, they've cut income tax for the highest earners, and then, lo and behold, they're cutting funding to the NHS. That just sums up the Tories.
Councillor Elliott.
Tonight over the language of the STP. Well, a colleague's husband of mine who works in industry actually has the job title of Sustainability and Transformation Manager. Perhaps that's where they got the idea from. Anyway, he was charged with making a company in Coventry more sustainable, as it was deemed to not be making sufficient profit for the shareholders. Just before Christmas one year, he made all of the staff redundant and relocated the company to China. He personally received a huge bonus for this. He bought himself a third home and invested the rest, probably in an offshore tax haven. The company failed and has recently relocated back to Coventry. It was a false economy, but he did very well out of it. Is this the Tory model for the NHS, Madam Mayor? I believe it is. I challenged him about his ethics. Dog eat dog, he called it. Personally, I and the thousands of people in Nuneaton and Bedworth who've signed the various petitions would rather have the NHS run by human beings, not cannibalistic dogs.
Councillor Copland.
Thank you, Madam. And I'm Scottish, excuses there, obviously. Hence the reason, for years and years, I've carried a dictionary with me. Now, I'm not even going to bother with S, whatever that stands for, T, whatever that stands for. Let's just think of plan. Simple little word, which actually, according to my dictionary, it's a Collins English dictionary, well known, actually says plan. way thought out to do or achieve something. So what we should have here is simple information about how they're going to achieve something. Well, I never ever claim to be the cleverest person in any room. But I always think, well, I'm not the dumbest either, with a bit of luck. I haven't got a clue when I read that. I was completely lost. I've actually let some other people that I think are cleverer than me have a look at that, and they hadn't a clue what it was all about. They couldn't decipher it in any way. So that's the problem. Of course people will take out of it certain things, and other people will deny that that's the case. Councillor Golby, oh, she's left the room, to her credit, to her credit, she got this and she thought, I'll speak to somebody about this. The only problem is she spoke to the wrong person at the wrong place. Because, as the leader has said, this hasn't come from the Elliott. Of course the chief executive of the Elliott is going to say, there is not a plan. There is not a plan to do things. Because, there maybe isn't a plan to do these cuts at the moment. If I was going to cut something at home, I could say to my good lady, I've not got a plan. I've not got a plan yet. And then do it 10 minutes later and say, I've got a plan now. So you can always do that. That's just talk. And the idea, this thing about politicising things, I found it very interesting that, and strangely enough, it's only just hit me in the last 6 months or a year, that people in the party opposite that appear on television, when they're always up against the wall, don't politicise things. Well, hang on, they're not a political party, not the same one as me. Everything is politics. Everything. They talk about not being cuts, and I've heard the phrase, isn't it? Not being cuts. Well, how do you get this 500 million or 400, 260, whatever million? How do you achieve that without some sort of cuts? Or is it the same as the sort of thing that was on the side of the bus? All that money that was going to be coming in to the National Health Service up until the 23rd, on the 24th, no. I just have the feeling, because of all this and lots of other things, it's the classic thing. If you run something down, people start moaning about it, and then you make it a little bit worse. It can be the National Health Service, it can be a bus service, it can be any sort of service. A little shop, you don't have as much stock, people will disappear, and then, what is it? It's a failure. Of course it's a failure. And if the National Health Service goes down that road, there's plenty of people. It's been said about people in America, and there's people here just waiting to jump on it. They'll make money out of it, but it won't be as good. The one thing, I've been involved with the George Eliot. I've had bad experiences up there. Bad experiences up there with end-of-life care within the family. Shocking. We didn't actually put a complaint in, but we spoke to them up there, and I know things are better now. I've been assured of that, and I've seen it. It's actually come to one of our OSPs about that, and it's a lot better. I've had bad experience personally. They nearly missed my cancer. But, having said that, it didn't go like that because there's always double checks. And there's one lady up there that I want to even mention tonight, and she's not a doctor. She's not, as far as I'm aware, medical and that, but there's one lady up there that actually saved my life. Jean Whittaker, MBE. She didn't get the MBE for saving my life. Why should she? But she's got the MBE for other things. She saved my life by making sure my operation went ahead.
In the Elliott, and I'm proud to be born in the Elliott. My wife is a sister at the Elliott in one of the units that he's mentioned, and morale at the moment is low. We've just built the job up, and now we're going down. And she is very upset about all that is going on. She cares for end-of-life people, and I am saddened by it all. Thank you.
Councillor Traymans.
Well, and I'd like to make some other thanks, very rarely, to Councillor Harvey and others who've echoed my comments earlier about the fact that the health service should always be free at the point of delivery, and that it's essential that the key services are delivered locally. There was so much agreement when Councillor Wilson first stood up. There was so much agreement. Most of this, the vast majority, we could agree to. But you didn't want that. You didn't want agreement. You wanted a show trial. You wanted to make up all sorts of figures. I've had every number I can imagine banded at me tonight. 30 billion here, 30 billion there. Well, how about some facts? The fact is that 10 years ago, spending on the NHS was £75 billion a year. And that's gone up in 2015-16. Real terms increase up to 117 billion. And there's a further real terms increase to 120 billion for 2019-20. So they're not cuts at all. In fact, what we have, I hope, is not everyone playing silly party politics, but some members opposite genuinely not understanding. And you know what? The STP thing, it is impenetrable. It is very difficult language. It's very hard to get a grip of. And if you're looking for it to give you the definitive and conclusions, then you'll never find them. You got it all wrong. You didn't understand it. What is it? Well, when our MPs went and saw the Health Secretary, they found out. As I've mentioned, the STP document was released. I couldn't find any references supporting anything to do with departmental closures. That's because it's an initial internal document in process management for demand for future years, to accommodate growth in services, growth in use, not any cuts. Now, I didn't fully understand all the language in there. I wasn't supposed to. It wasn't a public consultation document. It was a document that was opaque, that wasn't good. We've heard all sorts of criticism about the fact that the chair on the board is clearly conflicted out. Yeah, we agree with all of that. That's yet more that we all agree on. And at the county, everybody agreed on that and voted unanimously against it. But you couldn't do that. You couldn't have unanimity. You couldn't put people first. You had to call a special council so that you could have a show trial, all have your say, make up any numbers you want, call them cuts. Well, the facts are there are no cuts. What these people are talking about in a very badly opaque way is how they manage future growth, delivering more services to more people, the very opposite of cuts. And now, if you didn't understand that, that's fair enough. But to then go and make something up that suited your political purposes, because Jeremy Corbyn turned up a couple of weeks beforehand, and you all thought it would be fun to put things on social media, didn't you, and get all that horribly wrong? Yeah, I don't know why you do this. There are very serious issues here where you have complete agreement on all the substantial stuff, but then you go and ruin it all with petty party politics. And everybody can see that. The local health service is too important to be your political football. We've heard that you've damaged morale with all these scaremongering and stories at the Elliott. You lot have done that. You've done it with your scare stories and your smears. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That hospital has struggled and has turned things round. But we know Labour recently isn't very good at running things. If you want to talk about nationally, well, what about the one health service that Labour does run in Wales? Hardly a shining example of success, is it? Now, I think, Madam Mayor, we just want to call this to the vote now. We are going to vote in favour of the motion because we believe in an NHS free at the point of delivery. We believe that all of our services should be delivered locally. Essential services must be. And we have grave concerns about the STP too and all the other things that have been mentioned, just like at the County Council. So we will, on that basis and that basis only, support this motion. And I think you should just move to the vote because we're going to run out of time for the next meeting.
I wonder how many people can remember over Bramcote Hospital. 99.9% of the people said, save the hospital. What happened? They closed it. And now they're suffering because there's nowhere for the bed blockers to go. I have no faith whatsoever in this consultation because it's all done and dusted. We read in the local press today that they've asked for information about it. And what comes back? The answer, it's not in the public interest. I ask you, if this document is not in the public interest, what is?
Councillor Longdon, you have the right to reply.
Thanks to some of my colleagues, I've managed to cross one or two things off. Good the Tories are at putting money in. What he fails to mention is how good they are at taking it out. Because if there are real term increases, and if that's true, why is the NHS in crisis? Now, I'll tell you why it's in crisis. It's because if they give a 5% increase to the NHS, that comes with loads of conditions to it. Loads of conditions on productivity, on savings, and no account of inflation. So 5% goes in, and they've got to save 7% at the other end. That's why the NHS is in crisis. And you can talk about your £10 billion, but you can't get away with saying that's a cut. That's not a cut, because exactly it is a cut. The £8 million, they've already made that. They've already made the £8 million they're going to put in because they've already got that back. So everybody else has got to find the £22 billion, including the people of here. You want facts, especially about other countries. I'll give you a few facts. The facts are that France, Germany, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland all spend more of their GDP on their health than we do. And in terms of direct expenditure per head, I'll give you the big one. Switzerland spends $6,787 per head. UK spend $3,971 per head. So we're the fifth richest country in the world, allegedly, and yet we spend far, far less of our GDP on the health service. That's what the government has done for us all. I'm mindful, Madam Mayor, that I was asked some questions at the start of this and I never got the chance to answer. So I'll tell you where, I think somebody else mentioned it, Warwickshire County Council refused to endorse the STP. North Warwickshire, their health board has gone the same way, and their council will be taking a recommendation along the same route as us. Rugby, I have no idea. They seem to be flying their kite somewhere else. Warwick, today I asked where they were with it, and I was told that they hadn't really bothered to discuss it yet. Stratford portfolio holder has never attended a Health and Wellbeing Board meeting, and he's never attended a meeting of the health portfolio holders. Not once. And nobody knows. I've never seen him. And I keep asking the question, why are Stratford just walking away from this? What are they doing in Stratford? If we're all in it together, or supposed to be all in it together, where are they? And what is their opinion? We don't know. We don't even have a report on what they're doing as a borough council, which we should be having, because Rachel Jackson is very good. Ours is the longest report in all of them. And that to stand in the corner for telling enough to keep repeating it. But at the end of the day, Coventry are not very happy with this. Their position, I assume, will be coming clear on Monday when there's a joint meeting with Coventry. We'll know, but they're not very happy with it, and I don't think they're going to endorse it. In regards to the tertiary part of it, we had all this argument during the acute service review. Nobody's arguing that we don't need some sort of tertiary hospital, and it happens to be UHCW. So if you have a heart attack, you might go to the Elliot, where they can stabilise you, and then go to UHCW for your treatment. Nobody's saying anything about not having a tertiary hospital, because it's important that they do. You're saying there's no proposals to close A&E. Right. There are things in here which say about A&E becoming... I didn't think I was on the clock for the... Well, I've not answered all the questions, Madam Mayor. Well, I was operating under a misapprehension on that, because I'll finish then by saying that the STP doesn't say anything. But if we give blind endorsement to this document, that leaves the door open to anything they claim is in that document when they want to come back on the individual items. It's happened before, and it's not going to happen again, because we're not going to endorse this document tonight, and hopefully we will go back, or I will be able to go back and tell them exactly that.
Recorded vote will be taken.
Madam Mayor, I will read out the names of each members in alphabetical order, who will then indicate if they are for or against the motion. Councillor Aldington. Councillor Beaumont. Councillor Bennett. Councillor Bonner. Councillor Brindley apologies. Councillor Copland. Councillor Daffin. Councillor Doherty apologies. Councillor Doughty. No. Councillor Elliott. Councillor Gizane apologies. Councillor Glass. Councillor Golby. Councillor Gran apologies. Councillor Gutteridge. Councillor Hancocks. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Haynes. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Kondaka. Councillor Tony Lloyd apologies. Councillor Ian Lloyd. Councillor Longdon. Councillor Margrave. Councillor Caroline Phillips. Councillor Neil Phillips. Councillor Gwyn Pomfret. Councillor Margaret Pomfret. Councillor Jill Shepherd. Councillor Tracy Shepherd apologies. Councillor Tandy. Councillor Tromans. Councillor Watkins. And Councillor Wilson.
That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors and ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the business of the first extraordinary meeting. I now propose a short 5-minute adjournment before we commence the next extraordinary meeting.